So corporate governance in the business and business organizations. This too is an extremely important topic, especially maybe for some of you who might be considering like entrepreneurship or starting your own business, or going back to the family farm and how things are set up, and there's important reasons for setting up or choosing different types of entities, and we'll talk about those just in basic in this chapter, but something definitely that everybody would want to look into as you get into other businesses and whatnot. Or like in my case, I managed some rental units for some folks, and a while back we had to make that decision, and we chose to go with an LLC, which we'll talk about briefly. So, describe factors to consider a little bit. Basic organizational forms, absolutely, and some of the reasons. We'll talk about some of the hybrids. LLCs have become probably the more popular. And the complexity, absolutely. It can be and is complex, and oftentimes it would be appropriate to suggest that you would seek professional help, both from accountants and lawyers when setting these things up. So the size of ownership, that's a bit of a misnomer, but closely held or private corporations are ones where you and I may not be able to buy or sell stock. It doesn't necessarily mean that you couldn't. I'll give you an example. The bank that I worked for, Independence Bank, is considered a closely held bank. There's probably around 200 shareholders, and sometimes the stock does transfer. Somebody might sell a little bit, and somebody else, new or existing, might buy that. Okay. But it's not publicly held. It's not traded on any public stock exchange like you and I would see for Apple or Amazon or Microsoft or General Electric, right? And there's not the same kind of liquidity as a big thing, right? If you own stock in Independence Bank, I can't just call up my broker and say I want you to sell that today. Okay? If I own GE, I can in fact do that. In fact, I've on some stocks that I've owned, I've called my broker and said I'd like to sell this, and it's actually been sold while he and I were still on the phone, kind of completing the details. And so there's a lot more liquidity, they would say, the ability to move that stock and convert it to cash when you have a publicly held one versus a closely held. Closely held are often also, though, family and friends. In other words, there's a lot of folks that have a lot of farms and ranches that have C corporations, okay, because there's some advantages to setting those up. There's a lot of small businesses that are either S corporations or LLCs or those other things that we talk about. So, which is not a basic form of business organization. Well, a corporation is, partnership is, and sole proprietorship is. So, by process of elimination, we'll say it's the union, right? So what are some of the factors? Well, certainly cost of creation. To form, and we'll talk about some of these, but to form some of these organizations can be kind of expensive. Yeah, you can do some of the stuff yourself, and you can save that work. But again, if your business and some of the decisions you need to make in regards to that business are that complicated, again, I think it's good advice to maybe seek counsel unless you are in fact counsel yourself. Okay, so the cost of creation can be big, but if you're talking about a sole proprietorship or a partnership, the cost of creation can be nothing. The continuity or the stability or the dissolution. What do you want to happen if you die or if the business closes up or those types of things? Control of the decisions. That gets back to that maybe closely held versus publicly held, or even sold to other people, even if it is closely held. Owner liability. Taxation's a huge issue, okay, huge issue, as is owner liability. I would say these two oftentimes are going to be preeminent when trying to make that decision. And this is I think this is in your text, but it's worth looking at, right? The types of entities that you can set up. A proprietorship, just do it. Technically, if you walk down the street with your lawnmower and you mow the neighbor's lawn and they pay you $20, technically you're a sole proprietorship. Okay, You've got unlimited liability. If your lawnmower kicks up a rock and breaks out a window, you personally or / in the business have to pay for that, right? Okay. A partnership is equally as easy. I've got agreement. I think your book might have agreement. I think I put in the question marks. And the reason for that is that in Montana, anyhow, there's no requirement that partnerships have an agreement, either verbal or written. Okay, and so technically, if you and your buddy walk down the street with a lawnmower and mow the lawn for the same $20, you have a partnership. Okay. I won't. We go through some of these as we go along, so I'm not going to go through all of them. But this is kind of a nice little chart, that tells you what happens there. So I think I'll stop now, and we'll come back in a little bit and do a part 2.